The fluorescent lights in Lab 7 were still buzzing when my keycard stopped working. I'm Marcus Cole, 48 years old, and I just watched 17 years of my life get handed to someone who couldn't tell a lithium cathode from a car battery. Derek Pennington, the CEO's 1-year-old nephew, was leaning against my own workbench when he said it didn't even bother standing up straight. Effective today, all intellectual property related to the VoltEdge solid-state battery platform is being consolidated under Pennington Energy corporate ownership. Marcus, your consulting role has been terminated. We appreciate your contributions. Contributions like I'd brought donuts to a meeting instead of inventing the single most advanced battery technology on the planet. VoltEdge wasn't just a product. It was a revolution. I'd built molecule by molecule over 17 years. The energy density was 3 times anything on the market. Every major EV manufacturer on Earth was desperate to license it. The Department of Energy had classified portions of the research for national security purposes. $2.1 billion in patents, all registered under my name, and this kid in his Italian loafers was telling me my contributions were appreciated. The 6 engineers in the room kept their eyes on the floor. Not Dr. Reeves, who'd co-authored 3 papers with me. Not Janet from the patent office, who'd processed every filing I'd ever submitted. Not even Tommy Lou, whose entire career existed because I'd mentored him through 5 years of failed experiments until he finally got his breakthrough. I unclipped my lab badge, set it on the bench next to a half-finished prototype cell that still smelled like electrolyte solution. Derek watched me, probably expecting the usual anger, threats, maybe tears, the script these guys always imagine. Instead, I asked, "Derek, did legal walk you through Section 14C of my original agreement?" His face went blank for half a second. "Our attorneys have reviewed everything thoroughly." "Marcus, the transition is clean." I nodded, picked up my bag. "Then you've got nothing to worry about." I paused at the door, looked back at the lab I'd practically lived in since I was 31 years old. "Enjoy the power," I said. "But keep an eye on your gauges. When the charge runs out, it runs out fast. Nobody in that room understood what I meant. That was fine. They would see. Back in 2008, when Pennington Energy was still a 12-person startup operating out of a converted warehouse in Newark, the company's co-founder, Dr. Helen Vargas, and I had written something very specific into my employment contract. Helen was a chemist like me. She understood that in our industry, the person who builds the formula is the formula. You can't separate the inventor from the invention. Not legally, not technically, not ethically. We called it the Deadman cell protocol. Straightforward concept buried in the technical appendices that corporate lawyers never read because it's full of molecular specifications and federal compliance jargon. The protocol tied my biometric authentication retinal scan, digital signature, even my specific electrochemical methodology to every patent filing in the Federal Energy Database. Any transfer of ownership required dual verification. My explicit authorization plus confirmation from the Department of Energy's patent registry. Without both, within 72 hours, the federal system would automatically flag the patents as disputed and freeze all commercial licenses. Helen used to say something I never forgot. "Chemistry doesn't lie, Marcus. Molecules don't care about boardroom politics. If you build the formula right, it protects itself." She'd retired 3 years ago when Richard Pennington restructured the company and pushed out everyone who remembered the startup days. Smart woman. She saw what was coming. The MBAs replacing the PhDs, the investor decks replacing the research papers, the family name replacing actual merit, and she got out clean. Moved to a farmhouse in Vermont and started teaching community college chemistry. Said she'd rather explain covalent bonds to freshmen than watch suits destroy what we'd built. I drove home that evening through Newark traffic, taking the long way past the old warehouse where it all started. The building was a vape shop now, 17 years of my life, and the place where I'd first crystallized VoltEdge didn't even have a plaque. My apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, one converted into a private lab that I had never connected to Pennington's network. Best decision I ever made. The equipment was modest compared to Lab 7, but everything I needed was there. My original research notebooks, backup copies of every formula iteration, and most importantly, my personal authentication terminal linked directly to the Department of Energy's patent verification system. I sat down, opened my laptop, and ran a diagnostic. The Deadman cell protocol was active, humming quietly in the background like a heartbeat. The 72-hour countdown had already started the moment Derek filed the ownership transfer without my biometric confirmation. 72 hours, 3 days. That was all the time Pennington Energy had left before every VoltEdge license on Earth went dark. Day 1, 11:47 p.m. My phone rang. Unknown number. Dr. Cole. The voice was young, nervous, whispered like she was hiding in a stairwell. It was Janet from Patents. I recognized the slight Boston accent. Janet? They have no idea, do they? About Section 14C? No, I said, watching the countdown timer on my screen tick past 71 hours, 14 minutes, and 33 seconds. They don't. God. Derek's planning a massive press conference tomorrow morning. CNBC, Bloomberg, the whole thing. He's going to announce that Pennington now owns VoltEdge outright, and they're launching an exclusive partnership with 3 automakers. The stock is already up 15% on rumors. I lean back in my chair. Then tomorrow is going to be very educational for him. Marcus, I tried to warn them. I pulled the original contract and highlighted Section 14C. Richard's chief counsel looked at it for 30 seconds and said it was, and I quote, legacy boilerplate with no enforcement mechanism. Clears throat. Then he threw it in the recycling bin. Of course he did. Some of us remember Marcus. Some of us know who actually built this. The line went dead. I sat in the dark for a while, listening to the hum of my equipment. 17 years, 4,000 experiments, 212 failed prototypes before VoltEdge worked, 11 patents, 9 sleepless months getting the DOE classification approved. And Derek Pennington, who'd graduated from Wharton 2 years ago with a thesis on disruptive innovation in legacy energy markets, thought he could take all of that with a boardroom vote and a handshake from his uncle. Let me tell you about Derek. The kid had never set foot in a laboratory before his uncle gave him a corner office. Never held a beaker, never calibrated a spectrometer, never spent 3 days straight trying to figure out why a solid-state electrolyte kept degrading at high temperatures. But he could talk. Lord, could he talk? Synergistic value creation, paradigm-shifting market positioning, vertical integration of next-generation energy solutions. He'd stand in front of investors with his perfect hair and his Harvard cufflinks and make VoltEdge sound like something he dreamed up over brunch. The engineers used to joke about it in the break room quietly, of course, because nobody wanted to get fired. Tommy Lou once said, Derek couldn't change a car tire, but he could give you a 40-slide deck on the future of automotive maintenance. Got a good laugh. Nobody laughed when Derek started making personnel decisions. Day 2, 8:45 a.m. I drove to the diner across the street from Pennington's headquarters. Corner booth, black coffee, clear view of the front entrance through the window. The building was a glass tower that Richard had built 5 years ago when the VoltEdge contract started bringing in real money. My technology paid for every square foot of that tower, and now they'd locked me out of it. The TV above the counter was tuned to CNBC. At exactly 9:20 a.m., Derek appeared on screen, standing behind a podium with the Pennington Energy logo projected 20 ft tall behind him. Navy suit, red tie, American flag pin on his lapel the whole performance. Today marks a historic milestone for Pennington Energy, he announced, voice, steady smile, practiced. We are proud to confirm full corporate ownership of the VoltEdge solid-state battery platform, the most advanced energy storage technology in the world. This technology will power the next generation of American electric vehicles, secure our national energy grid, and cement Pennington's position as the global leader in clean energy innovation. I took a sip of coffee. Bitter, appropriate. Under Pennington leadership, VoltEdge will reach its full commercial potential, he continued. We're announcing exclusive partnerships with 3 major automakers and a $4.7 billion manufacturing expansion. This is what happens when visionary leadership meets groundbreaking technology. Visionary leadership. The kid had been in the energy industry for 23 months. The ticker at the bottom of the screen read, "Surges 22% on VoltEdge acquisition news. Analysts call it deal of the decade." The waitress refilled my coffee. "You work over there?" she asked, nodding toward the Pennington Tower. "Used to," I said. "Long time ago." Day 2, 2:30 p.m. The messages started coming. Former colleagues, mostly younger engineers who'd worked in my lab over the years. "Is it true you signed everything over? Derek's telling everyone he co-developed VoltEdge. We all know that's insane. Marcus, what the hell's going on?" I didn't respond to any of them. In 41 hours, the answers would be self-evident. Day 2, 7:00 p.m. The invitation arrived by courier. Heavy cream envelope embossed with the Pennington crest. A celebration of innovation honoring the VoltEdge legacy. Black tie, the Meridian Club downtown. Richard Pennington's favorite spot. Wood-paneled walls. $500 steaks. The kind of place where fortunes get made and people get forgotten over dessert. Legacy. They kept using that word like I was already dead. I wore my one good suit. Dark charcoal, white shirt, no tie. If you're going to watch someone dig their own grave, you should at least be comfortable. "Marcus, Derek met me at the entrance like we were fraternity brothers. Genuinely glad you're here. After all, you were." He paused, searching for the right condescending word instrumental in the early development work. "Early development work. I invented the entire technology. Appreciate the invitation," I said. "Nice to be remembered." The dining room seated 22, Derek at the head, naturally. Richard to his right, looking like a man who just bought his nephew the world's most expensive toy. The new legal team, 4 of them, none older than 35, all wearing watches that cost more than my car, scattered around the table like palace guards. A few board members I recognized, a couple of investor representatives pretending to be friends. I took a seat near the middle of the table where I could see everyone's face clearly. The wine was a 2015 Bordeaux, probably $800 a bottle. Richard stood first, glass raised with the practiced elegance of a man who'd never been told no. To innovation, he declared to family and to the Pennington name carrying American energy into the future. Everyone drank. I lifted my glass but kept it at my lips without sipping. Derek stood next, beaming. He looked like a kid on Christmas morning, which, given that someone had just handed him $2.1 billion in stolen patents, was fairly accurate. "Tonight isn't just about business," he said. "It's about legacy. VoltEdge represents 17 years of research. And now he looked at me. It represents the future of Pennington Energy. Fully integrated. Fully ours. Fully ours." I set down my fork. "Integration is the tricky part," I said, keeping my voice casual. "Solid-state chemistry is sensitive stuff. You want to make sure all your federal certifications are current before you start manufacturing. The DOE doesn't mess around with energy patents, especially the classified ones." A few people shifted in their seats. Derek's smile tightened by a fraction. "Our legal team has handled all compliance requirements," he said, but I heard the slight crack in his confidence. "Good," I said, cutting a piece of filet mignon. "Just make sure your authentication protocols are squared away before the 72. Our window closes. Federal energy patents have automatic safeguards built in. If the verification lapses," I shrugged. "Well, let's just say the lights go out and not in a fun way." I said it the same way you'd remind someone to check their tire pressure. Friendly, casual, completely devastating if you understood what it meant. Richard was watching me now, fork frozen halfway to his mouth. Some instinct, the kind you develop after decades in business, was telling him something was wrong. But Derek just laughed it off and steered the conversation back to stock projections. Halfway through dessert chocolate soul because, of course, a server approached Derek with a phone. "Mr. Pennington, there's an urgent call from the Department of Energy Compliance office." The table went quiet. Derek excused himself, stepped into the hallway. I could see him through the glass door, back stiffening, free hand gripping the doorframe, head shaking slowly. He was gone for 7 minutes. When he came back, the color had drained from his face, but he forced a smile and sat down. "Everything okay?" Richard asked. "Fine," Derek said. "Just a routine verification issue. Legal will handle it in the morning." But his hands were shaking when he picked up his wine glass, and he didn't make another toast for the rest of the night. I stood up, folded my napkin neatly. Thank you for dinner. It was a lovely evening. I looked around the table at 21 people who were either complicit in stealing my life's work or too afraid to say anything about it. Keep your phones charged tonight. Tomorrow's going to be interesting. Richard caught my arm as I passed. Marcus, what did you do? I didn't do anything, Richard. I just built my work, right, and I protected it well. Day 2, 11:58 p.m. I sat on my apartment balcony watching the Newark skyline. The Pennington Tower was lit up like a beacon, every floor blazing, which meant their legal team was probably working through the night, frantically trying to understand what Section 14C actually meant. My phone rang. Richard Pennington calling personally. Marcus, let's be reasonable. Whatever issue exists with the patent documentation, we can resolve it. Name your price. This isn't about price, Richard. Everyone has a price, Marcus. A board seat. Full credit on the technology. We'll put your name on the building. I almost laughed. My name on a building I paid for was 17 years of my life. Generous. Then, what do you want? I want your nephew to go on national television tomorrow morning and tell the truth. That he never invented anything. That he stole the work of a scientist who gave 17 years to your company. And I want a public apology, not to me, but to every engineer and researcher in that building whose work gets erased every time a suit with the right last name takes credit for things he doesn't understand. That's career suicide for Derek. You're asking me to destroy my own nephew. Richard, your nephew, destroyed himself the moment he decided that an MBA and a family name made him an inventor. I'm just the chemistry catching up. Long silence. Then you have until 6 a.m. to reconsider. After that, our attorneys will. Your attorneys can't override federal patent law, Richard, and they definitely can't override the Department of Energy. I checked my watch. You have about 6 hours. Use them wisely. Day 3. 5:52 a.m. I was already awake, standing at my window with a cup of coffee, watching the sky turn from black to deep blue to the first pale gold of morning. My laptop was open on the kitchen counter, the Deadman cell countdown at 0 hours, 7 minutes, and 44 seconds, and dropping. At exactly 6 a.m., the 72-hour window closed. I didn't need to be inside the Pennington building to know what happened, but I could see it, literally see it from my apartment window a mile away. The tower's lights flickered once, twice, then every floor went dark simultaneously. Not a power outage, something much more precise. The Deadman's cell protocol had fully activated. Every VoltEdge patent in the federal database was now flagged as disputed ownership. Every commercial license, the automaker partnerships, the grid storage contracts, the military applications automatically suspended pending verification. Every system running on VoltEdge technology received the same message. License revoked. Federal verification failed. Authorized patent holder Dr. Marcus Cole. The ripple effect was immediate and devastating. 3 major automakers had production lines built entirely around VoltEdge battery specifications. When the licenses froze, their assembly systems triggered automatic safety shutdowns. You can't manufacture batteries with disputed patent status. Not with DOE oversight. Then the grid storage contracts went dark. Then the military applications. Then the backup systems that ran on VoltEdge secondary patents. Within 20 minutes, the Department of Energy had issued an emergency compliance order. Within 30, the SEC had frozen all Pennington stock trading pending investigation. Within an hour, FBI agents were pulling into the Pennington headquarters parking lot. My phone exploded. Reporters, former colleagues, patent attorneys smelling blood, and Richard Pennington calling 4 times in a row, each voicemail more desperate than the last. I answered on the 5th call. Marcus, for God's sake, everything is shutting down. The automakers are threatening to sue. The military contracts are frozen. The FBI is here asking about securities fraud. You have to stop this. I can't stop it, Richard. The federal patent system doesn't have a pause button. Your nephew filed a fraudulent ownership claim. The system did what it was designed to do. This will destroy the company. 3,000 employees, Marcus. Think about them. I thought about them for 17 years. Richard, where were they when Derek stood on national television and claimed he invented my technology? Where were they when I was escorted out of my own lab? Those 3,000 people watched your nephew steal my life's work, and nobody said a single word. Not one silence on the line. Then quietly, what would it take to fix this? Truth, I said. Public, complete, and permanent. By noon, it was everywhere. Every business channel, every tech blog, every financial news outlet. Pennington Energy collapses after patent fraud exposed. Stock plummets 74% before trading halt. FBI investigating CEO's nephew for securities fraud and IP theft. DO revokes all VoltEdge commercial licenses. The footage was something. Derek being walked out of the building by federal agents. Suit jacket gone, tie loosened, looking nothing like the confident executive who'd been toasting his own genius 40 hours earlier. Richard announcing his resignation at a hastily assembled press conference, reading from a prepared statement with the dead eyes of a man watching everything he'd built evaporate. Board members scattering like roaches when the lights come on. Each one suddenly remembering urgent personal matters that required immediate attention. The automaker CEOs released a joint statement expressing shock and concern about Pennington's misrepresentation. Translation: they were hiring lawyers and preparing lawsuits that would make Derek's legal problems look like parking tickets. I spent the afternoon in my apartment fielding calls. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. Was I going to take over Pennington, restart the company, save the jobs? No. I told every single one of them. Pennington is done. But the technology isn't. 8 months later, I was sitting in a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Delaware River, smaller than Pennington's Tower. Cleaner, honest. The nameplate on the door read, Coal Energy Technologies. Nadia Okafor sat across from me, the junior electrochemist who'd quit Pennington the day after the collapse, and showed up at my apartment with a box of research notebooks and a look that said, I'm not letting this die. She reminded me of myself at that age. Relentless, curious, more interested in the science than the stock price. The Department of Energy contract is finalized, she said, sliding a folder across the table. $3.8 billion over 10 years. Next-generation solid-state batteries for the national grid, military applications, and the new EV infrastructure program. They want you, specifically you, leading the research. I opened the folder. The numbers were staggering. More than double what VoltEdge had generated for Pennington over 17 years. And this time, every dollar was going to the people who actually did the work. What about the automaker deals? I asked. All three want to restart their partnerships, but with us, not Pennington. Their legal teams are drafting agreements now. Nadia paused, then smiled. Oh, and Toyota called. They want to discuss a separate $1.2 billion joint venture for their next-generation platform. Apparently, they only want to work with the person who actually invented the technology. Imagine that. My computer chimed. Email from the Department of Energy. Subject line: National Innovation Medal nomination for Dr. Marcus Cole. The message recognized my contributions to American energy security and advanced materials science. 17 years after I'd first synthesized the VoltEdge compound in a converted warehouse in Newark, the federal government was finally acknowledging who actually deserved the credit. I forwarded the email to Dr. Helen Vargas with a online note. Chemistry didn't lie. Her reply came back 12 minutes later. Never does, Marcus. Never does. Proud of you. I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window. Somewhere in Arizona, Derek Pennington was working at his father-in-law's car dealership, learning what it felt like to earn a commission instead of inherit one. Richard had retreated to a golf community in Scottsdale, dodging SEC subpoenas and trying to rebuild a reputation that 17 years of someone else's genius had built for him. The Pennington Tower was being converted into mixed-use apartments. I'd driven past it last week. The logo was already gone, replaced by a real estate developer's banner promising luxury living. You know what I think about sometimes? Nadia asked, breaking the silence. That night at the Meridian Club, Derek standing there with his $800 wine, toasting stolen technology, completely certain that nobody could touch him, and you just sitting there eating your steak, knowing exactly what was coming. I smiled. Helen Vargas told me something when I first started. She said, "Chemistry doesn't lie. Molecules don't care about boardroom politics. Build the formula, right, and it protects itself." Did you believe her? I always believed her. I just hoped I'd never have to prove it. Nadia nodded. Then she picked up the DOE contract folder and headed for the door. "I'll get the team started on the preliminary specs." Oh, she turned back. "The Wall Street Journal wants a profile. Reporter said she wants to call it the man who owned the battery. Tell her she can call it whatever she wants. As long as she spells the name right." Nadia laughed and left. I sat alone in the quiet office watching late afternoon light play across the river. The building was small. The team was young. The coffee machine was terrible. But every patent on the wall had the right name on it. Every engineer in the building was there because they'd earned it. And nobody was going to take credit for work they didn't do. Not here, not ever again. Looking back, the whole thing was never really about revenge. It was about something simpler and harder than that. It was about truth. The kind of truth that's built into the molecular structure of things that doesn't bend for last names or boardroom votes or press conferences with American flag pins. Sometimes justice doesn't come with sirens and handcuffs. Sometimes it comes quietly like a battery draining in the dark and visible until the moment the lights go out, and then everyone finally sees what was powering the whole system all along. Build it right, protect it well, and when someone tries to steal what you made, trust the chemistry. It never lies.